Hello, everybody. I'm Mr. Davenport, and welcome to Introduction to Biotechnology. So, today we are talking about something that is very important to our modern world, and that is infection control. So, an infection is when a microorganism, usually one that wants to do us harm, gets inside of our body and starts to grow. Now, our bodies are perfect for growing microorganisms, but these infections are invaders. They are not great, they're not wonderful, and they are potentially dangerous and deadly. And so, what we are going to about today are what are these pathogens that cause infections, how do they cause infections, and finally, how do we prevent those infections? So let's get started. First, we need to talk about microorganisms. So last week we discussed the cell. The cell is the basic living unit of life. So all microorganisms are basically cells, and it's something that you need a microscope to see. And some of these microorganisms are pathogens. That means that they are microorganisms that cause disease and lead to infection. Now, microorganisms that are beneficial and that are not harmful, we call normal flora. Those are normally found inside the body and found inside of a culture, and they're not a problem because they're supposed to be there. Pathogens are disease-causing microorganisms that are not supposed to be there. So not all microbes, not all microorganisms are pathogens. So there are a couple of different shapes of microorganisms. It's how we classify them. And so the first type of microorganism that we're going to discuss is bacteria. They are single-celled, and they usually grow in groups, and they multiply rapidly and quickly. And we classify them by their shape. There are round bacteria we call cocci. There are rod-shaped bacteria we call bacilli. There are spiral-shaped bacteria we call spirilla. How we treat bacterial infections caused by bacteria, is we use antibiotics. Antibiotics are the tools that we use to fight off bacterial infections. So some examples of bacterial infections are strep throat, tetanus, botulism. These are things that are caused by bacteria growing in the body. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a minute, and I'm going to give you a minute, and I want you to draw and label an example of a cocci bacteria, a bacilli bacteria, and a spiral bacteria. Just sketch it out. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be accurate so that you can remember. 10 more seconds, guys. So remember, the cocci is the round-shaped bacteria, the bacilli is the rod-shaped bacteria, and the spirilla is the spiral and kind of weird shaped. Anything that's not directly round or rod-shaped. All right, so next up we've got two other microorganisms. We have protozoa and fungus. Protozoa are one-celled animal-like organisms. They're not like bacteria. They don't like to grow in groups, and they like to move and be independent. They have many flagella, which aids them in their movement inside of fluids and liquids. Protozoa are what cause malaria and amoebic dysentery. I'm going to have a video that's going to explain what malaria is and how it harms human beings. Then we have fungus. These are plant-like microorganisms. And most of the time when we think about fungus and fungi, we think about mushrooms. Well, those mushrooms come from a collection of these tiny microorganisms that grow together in a colony that feed on live or dead matter, organic matter, and they come in the forms of yeast and molds and mushrooms. And they cause diseases on humans like ringworm, athlete's foot, and thrush, which are all kind of skin disorders where the fungus gets on the skin and grows and eats the dead skin cells. Sorry about that. Apologies. Now, the last two, rickettsia and viruses. Rickettsia are these small parasitic bacteria, and they grow very rapidly, and they live inside of other organisms. That is what parasitic means. So they live in fleas and lice and ticks, who then bite humans and pass these rickettsia on to people. One of the most common forms of a rickettsia infection is Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And again, I'm going to have a video in these notes after this that will help you guys visualize and see what these different microorganisms do. Viruses. Viruses are all the rage in the modern time of understanding how viruses spread, particularly the one that's keeping us separated from each other right now. Viruses can only be seen with an electron microscope. They are the smallest type of microorganism that we know of that exist. And they are so small, they have to use other cells to make copies of themselves in order to reproduce. And they're spread through the air and through blood and through body secretions. And common examples of viruses are the common cold, measles, mumps, chickenpox, and currently COVID-19. So, microorganisms. How do they grow? Why do they grow? Well, microorganisms, it doesn't matter what the kind, whether it's a bacteria or a rickettsia or a virus or a protozoa or a fungus. They all have three growing environments in common. They like it warm, they like it moist, and they like it dark. They like it humid, dark, and warm. That is what gives them the ability to thrive. Now, most of the time, we would think that all of these living things would need oxygen to live. But we break up our microorganisms into separate categories, the ones that need oxygen and the ones that don't. Microorganisms that need oxygen, we call aerobic. Okay, so when you're doing jumping jacks and aerobic exercises, you are breathing in more oxygen to feed your cells so that they have the oxygen that they need and that your lungs can pump blood so that you can be able to do that exercise more efficiently. So anaerobic means it requires oxygen to live. Anaerobic means that you do not need oxygen to live. And so some of these microorganisms that are pathogenic do not need oxygen in the same way that we need in order to survive. So pathogens cause infections in a lot of different ways. Some pathogens produce poisons. The bacteria are examples of the poison type of pathogen. They grow in the body and their waste is toxic to us. And so our body tries to fight against it. Some cause allergic reactions like fungi. Funguses only really harm us when they start to grow because they cause an allergic reaction somewhere in our body and our body reacts to it. And some, like viruses and rickettsia and protozoa, they specifically attack and destroy living cells. Their life cycle often requires, I'm sorry, I mumbled much mouth, require them to attack and destroy cells. So, then we have what we call nosocomial infections. These are infections that people pick up while at a hospital, while they're visiting people at a hospital. Then there are opportunistic infections. Opportunistic infections are what happen when a body's immune system is weak and an infection and a pathogen, a microorganism, leaps at that opportunity to get into a host and grow when the defenses are weak and the body cannot protect itself. So, most of the time, pathogens are transmitted through person-to-person contact, contaminated hands, contaminated substances, and droplets in the air. Okay? These are the major examples of transmission of disease. Okay? So, person-to-person contact, shaking hands with someone, giving someone a hug, giving someone a kiss, can pass these different types of diseases. Touching someone with unwashed, gross hands, contaminated substances that may have those pathogens growing on them, like food, soil, insects, and equipment. And then droplets in the air when someone sneezes or coughs and a virus or microorganism goes airborne. And so the reason that we keep saying wash your hands and wear a mask is to prevent potential infection of you so that you will not be spreading any diseases, okay? And you'll have your hands clean and you'll boost your own body's defenses to fight against any infection that might be around. So, then we have this idea, asepsis, which is critical for infection control in biotechnology. Asepsis is literally translated and means the absence of pathogens. And so the aseptic technique, a way that a policy and procedure that we follow in order to get rid of and have an absence of pathogens, includes washing your hands, having good personal hygiene, using disposable gloves when needed, and properly cleaning equipment and the environment. So this aseptic technique is important in making sure that we try to knock back some of the spread of all the pathogens and microorganisms out there that mean to do humans harm. So, hand washing. Hand washing is the most effective way to prevent any infection. Anytime that you feel that you have been contaminated by touching things that might have any kind of microorganism on it, touching soil, touching insects, touching food, you need to wash your hands. And so whenever they become contaminated, before and after a lab, after you use the bathroom, after you wash, after you cough, sneeze, or use tissue, and before and after you eat, and before and after you use contact lenses and put them in. All of this is vital in helping to prevent the spread of any kind of infection. So, what are the main ingredients of good hand washing? Well, soap, warm water, and friction. Then you make sure you clean all the surfaces of your hand and you keep your hands pointed down in this downward direction so that all of the bacteria can literally fall down the drain. Now, you're not going to kill all the bacteria simply by washing your hands, but it's a good start because it's getting, what the soap does is it literally lifts off dead cells, dead skin cells, bacteria, dirt, grime. Soap literally lifts that off and takes it off our skin, and the water washes it away and takes it down the drain. And so hand washing is absolutely critical when it comes to the aseptic technique. So the main points are soap, water friction, fingers pointed down. Now, alcohol-based hand rub, or as we affectionately refer to it as hand sanitizer. These are used in healthcare facilities, and they are great for spot checking in between washing your hands. And so it's usually used between patients when hands are not dirty. So it's a spot check. Hand sanitizer does not replace washing your hands, but if you don't have anything else, it's a good place to start. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to wrap this up because the other video is about 5 minutes. If you have any questions, please contact me. If you have anything that you need to know or you want me to expand on, please contact me and I will be happy to explain anything else. With that, y'all have a wonderful day.